Hi, I'm Miss Jasmine, and today we're going to learn how to do a project inspired by Claude Monet. Let me go ahead and switch to my table. Now for this project, you're going to need to start off with a colored piece of pastel paper. And then we're going to go ahead and start off with our drawing steps. Now these are going to be very simple. I'm going to use a colored pencil just so you can see what I'm doing. But I do suggest for you to use a regular pencil and press as light as you can. Now on the left, we're going to have a shape for our bush. And on the right, we're also going to have a bush, but it's just going to be a little bit different. Now yours does not need to be exactly the same as mine. You can go ahead, there's really no right or wrong when drawing a bush. We are going to have our bridge go across, so we're going to draw the bottom of the bridge and the top of the bridge. And then we're going to have a line underneath the bridge for the top of the pond. And then we're going to have two curvy lines going to the left for some bushes above the bridge, and then a wavy line to the right. On the bottom, we're going to have a kind of oval shape for the pond, and then we're just kind of mapping out some lighter areas, and then we're just going to have an organic line on the bottom. Okay, so that's literally all we're going to be doing for our drawing portion. Now we're going to work on our chalk pastel to add in our darkest areas. So for this, I'm going to actually start off with a black, and I'm going to fill in this area right here. Now when I do this, I'm just going to put in some little short strokes. They're less than ½ an inch long. And then I'm going to come over here, and this is kind of like a little hole inside the bushes where it would be a little bit darker. This is all above the bridge. Then over here on the side, I'm going to put a little bit of darkness. In this bush right here, I'm just going to put a few little vertical strokes using the corner of my pastel. Same thing over here on the bottom of this bush. I'm going to have a little bit of darkness, so I'm going to add a little bit of dark vertical strokes. And then this section over here, I'm going to add kind of a larger section of dark area. So I'm going to use little short vertical strokes with the black. Okay, so that's all I'm adding with the black. Now I'm going to go ahead and get a green. And I'm going to come above the black on this plant. And again, I'm using the corner and just drawing some thin lines. Come over to this bush. Draw some thin lines. And then right here on this little shadow, I'm just going to draw some short horizontal lines just like I did with the black. These are going to be the dark areas of bushes. So we want this to kind of look like leaves. So same thing over here, I'll just add some more vertical lines on top of the black, near the black, going all the way off the top left of my paper. Now I am going to go right on top of my bush, or my bridge right here. Just a little bit. I don't want to put too much on there because I'm going to be adding color pencil later, and the color pencil doesn't work too well on top of the chalk pastel, so we don't want to put too much over that bridge. Okay, I'm going to go to this area where we added the shadow as well and just add a few little horizontal lines, not over everything, but that should be enough. Now I'm going to tap my paper off to get most of the dust off, and then I'm going to use one finger. Now when I blend, I'm really trying to push that pastel into the grains of the pastel paper. And I want to pay attention to the direction that I am blending. So the same direction that I used with the pastel, same type of strokes I'm going to do when I blend. So little short staccato strokes on these areas. And the idea is that we're trying to simulate Impressionism, and Impressionism is when you use short strokes of paint. So you're kind of painting with your finger. Now when you get back down to this plant, just like this one, you want to kind of do longer strokes like a plant, like a different kind of plant. These are kind of like little short leaves on a tree back here, and then this is kind of like longer blades of grass. Okay. So next we're going to be adding in our medium areas in the background and water, and then we're going to lightly outline the bridge. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and take a medium green like this, and I'm just going to add a few little strokes on this bush, not too many. And then underneath the bridge, I'm going to add on top of the edge of the pond, just some little short vertical strokes. And then I'm going to just add a few little lines inside the pond. And then on this bush, I'm going to add a few more lines on the top. I'm going to use my finger to just kind of gently blend those areas in. Again, following the same stroke direction that I used to add the actual chalk pastel. And dump the dust off the paper very gently. Okay, so now I'm going to take a brown, and I'm going to go right underneath the bridge and just add like 1 or 2 strokes. And then I'm going to go on the bottom of this bush and just add a few strokes of brown. And then on this oval in the middle of the pond, I'm just going to add a few strokes of brown. And same thing with this section down here on the pond. Okay, now I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to gently blend that brown out. Go with the little strokes on this bush and then gently rub along the bottom of the bridge. Now I'm going to take like a purple or a blue, and I'm going to add a little bit of blue or purple along these brown areas inside the pond. And then gently blend. And then dump the extra dust off onto the table. So now I'm going to take that same blue and I'm just going to lightly map in my bridge. So I have the top and the bottom. And then I have a few crossbars, vertical crossbars. You can decide how many you want to do. You want to have like probably 3 at least. And then if you have extra room on the side, you can draw another one. And then another horizontal line going across. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add our highlights. So I'm going to use a white, and I'm going to go on this bush area and on the top right, and the areas that I have not added chalk pastel yet, I'm going to add some little white lines. And then over here on the left, anywhere that you haven't added your chalk pastel yet, you can go ahead and add that now. Over here, I have a little bit of space where I haven't put any chalk pastel, so I'll add my white lines there. Then on the pond, basically everything that's left on the pond, I'm going to add some white horizontal lines. And this is kind of for like the choppiness of the water in the pond. Okay. So now I'm just going to take some green. I have a little bit of room underneath my bridge where I don't have any color. So you may or may not have that. Everybody's picture is going to be slightly different, but I do want to add a little bit of value in there. And then also just behind the bridge, we're still going to want to have some value. So you can extend, you know, some of this green from the bush, behind the bridge. And then even some of this black that we used in the very beginning, you could bring down. It would not bring much down because again, we're going to try to do our bridge with color pencil, and if there is too much chalk pastel on there, then the color pencil won't work very well. Okay, so I'm going to blend these dark areas just because my finger is already pretty dirty. But then now my finger is black, so I do need to clean my finger before moving forward. So you can go wash your hands, just make sure that they're super dry before you continue, because if you touch the chalk pastel with a wet finger, it won't work too well. So now that my finger is clean, I'm going to work on my white areas first, and I'm just going to do little staccato lines, little horizontal strokes as if I'm using a paintbrush. So just look all over your picture for where you added white. These ones are going to be like kind of vertical lines. And then over here on the top right section, they're kind of diagonal lines. And then I did add this green underneath the bridge on the bottom left of the bridge. So I'm just going to fill those in. And now I have the areas inside the bridge. So I'm just going to do this real gently. I do need this area where the bridge is to really be rubbed into the paper though, because if it's not, then my color pencils won't draw on top very well. Okay, just kind of blending out those blue lines that I had on there originally for the bridge, and then dump off your dust. Okay, clean your fingers again if you need to. Okay, so now we're going to shift into our color pencils. We'll probably come back with some chalk pastels later, so we're not completely done with those. So we're going to go ahead and take a dark blue color pencil, and we're going to color in the bottom of the bridge, the top of the bridge, the middle of the bridge, and then the crossbars. Now you are on a textured paper, so you're not going to be able to get a super smooth line with your color pencils, so don't even worry about that. We're going for an impressionistic look anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So now you're going to need a white color pencil, and we're going to add some highlights. So you're going to go right above all those sections you just did with the blue color pencil and add a white line. And this will add a lot of contrast. And contrast really makes your pictures look more realistic. Contrast is the difference between light and dark. And now I'm going to add white on the sides of the crossbars. Okay. So now if you want to give a sense of depth, you could add more lines for the bridge as if this was the front of the bridge, and now we also have the back of the bridge. So for that, I'm going to actually use a purple color pencil, and I'm going to draw vertical crossbars as if they're kind of the back bars. I'm also going to add the purple on top of the white, which would be the bottom of the bridge, like the part that you would walk on. We're not going to see too much of it, but just a little indication. Then I draw these vertical bars, and they're just slightly offset from the ones in the front. Now when you get in the middle, it might switch to the left side because that's how perspective would work. And then you'd see the middle crossbar just above the white line. and then you could see the top bar just above the white line all the way on the top. Now again, you're just trying to give it an impression of a bridge. It doesn't need to be super detailed. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to work on the plants on the two sides of the bridge as well as the plants underneath the bridge. So we're going to start off with a black color pencil, and we're going to go right at the base of this bush over here, and we're just going to draw some vertical lines. And we're basically trying to merge the plant with the pond. So we're going on top of the pond, going on top of the bridge, on top of the plant. Again, I'm using black. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to start doing some little small bushes. So just short lines that are both diagonal and vertical. Okay, and then just kind of come along the edge of that pond line with the black and just shade gently. Again, you're kind of merging the pond with the edge of the plants. And now you're going to come over to this bush on the left, and you're going to do the same thing that you did to the bush on the right. So you're just adding some long strokes. Okay, now that we've added the black, now we're going to go in with some green. So I'm going to start off with a dark green, and I'm just going to go right next to all the black areas and do basically the exact same thing. I'm just extending it a little bit further with the green. And again, this is pretty loose. Nothing is super detailed. It's all just kind of strokes of color indicating almost like symbols of what you're trying to draw. Come over to this bush, draw some green lines just like I did with the black. Okay, and then I'm going to just keep going. I'm going to take a light green now. Add some more vertical lines, really filling that bush in now. I'm basically using the light green to fill in any areas that I haven't filled in yet. All these bushes underneath the bottom of the bridge. And the amount of color pencil that you're going to add really depends on how much chalk pastel you put on. So if you put a lot of chalk pastel on, you're probably not going to need as much color pencil, and vice versa. At this point, I'm kind of almost scribbling. I'm just trying to fill in this plant to make it look full. And normally we don't press hard with color pencil, but in this case, you might need to press hard in order for it to show up. Okay. So go ahead and take as much time as you feel that you need for that. I'm also just going to go back on my bridge and use my black. Now that I've done all this black down here, I feel like I need to balance out the bridge with a little bit of black on top of the blue parts. And again, that's optional. It just depends on how you feel your picture is looking. I just want to make sure that my bridge is still popping off and showing up. Okay. So again, take as long as you need to do that part. Now what we're going to do is we're going to work on the pond below. So for the pond below, what we're going to do is we're going to add in more detailed flowers and grass in the pond water. And we may need to add a little bit of contrast to the water as needed. So for this, we're going to need a white color pencil to start, as well as a black color pencil. Now I'm going to sharpen my color pencil. So I'm going to start off actually with some black. Now, this is not super defined. You want to kind of think of it as just these are a bunch of little ovals. And then you're going to have some little flowers in there. So I could take my white and add some little flowers, but the white's not going to show up without the black. So then I got to go put the black at the base of the flower and then draw an oval around it. And you can draw as few or as many flowers that you want. And they don't have to be white. You could use yellow or pink, any kind of warm color I think would look really nice. And when you're drawing the ovals, they don't have to be complete ovals. Sometimes drawing an incomplete line is a little bit better because again, you're doing impressionism. You're just trying to give the impression or the symbolism of these lily pads, not super detailed version. Now in this part, you can just keep working on this. I mean, you could spend a lot of time on these pads, lily pads if you wanted to, or you could just draw a few kind of just to give the idea of it. It just depends how much time you want to spend on your picture. So as you can see, I'm just kind of drawing some loose circles or loose ovals and then shading underneath each one. Now you want to kind of have some areas where you have a lot of lily pads kind of gathered together, grouped together, and then other areas that you leave pretty empty, which is just like the pure water. Now, as you're adding, like we added white first, then we're adding black to make sure that we have some contrast. Then you're going to want to come back on the lily pads and add some green. Now, I suggest not coloring them completely green. You want to leave some of that white in order to have that contrast. But they are supposed to be green, so you want to add enough green to indicate that color. And I'm just kind of taking the dark green and coloring on top of the black. And then I'm going to take my light green and add that in as well, again, to add a little bit of contrast. And I'm just kind of doing like sideways strokes, not careful at all. And then here, I'm going to sharpen my pencil, so it might be a little bit loud again. I am pressing pretty hard with my light green. And now I'm just filling in the areas around the lily pads and around the flowers with the light green. I'm just going side to side. Now I do feel like I want my flowers to have a little bit of color, a little bit of pop of color, so I'm going to take some yellow orange and add that on these little flowers. And I might even take some regular orange and just put it at the base of the flowers. And I always like to mix colors, so I'm just going to put a little bit of orange on just a few of my lily pads just to add a little pop of color. The Impressionists often did that, where they would add the complementary or opposite colors throughout the painting to kind of show the reflection of the light on the objects. So the way that I did this section is the same way that you would do this section right here on the top of the pond, as well as this section down here. So I'm just going to continue working on that, and you can continue working as well. If you don't want to add that much detail, you can go ahead and fast forward in this video to the next section. I'm going to sharpen my white again. Okay, so I'm going to start off again with my ovals. I'll actually start with black. Now keep in mind, as the lily pads go farther and farther back on your picture, they should be more squashed like an ellipse rather than a circle, and they should be smaller. That's how perspective works. If things are larger in the foreground and they are smaller in the background. So if I come down here to the foreground, I can draw some really big ovals to show that that's closer to the viewer. Now, you don't have to just do little flowers. You can also do little plants, like the same plants that are growing on the edges of the pond. So I drew my ovals first. Now I'm going to take my black color pencil and I'm going to go underneath each oval and add my shadow. Okay, then I'm going to go take my green, darker green first, and sharpen that. And my lighter green. Okay, and then I'm going to go back with my white. Okay. Now at this point you want to kind of just look at your pond, and maybe you need to add some more blue in between the lily pads. Okay, and then these brown areas that we added before with the chalk pastel, you're going to want to take your blue and just lightly color over them so that they're not as brown or red, and kind of tint them with the blue color pencil on top. And then just kind of look at your picture and decide if there's anything else that you need to do to make your pond look finished. So I'm just going to add a little bit more black. So you really want to make sure that you keep contrast. So a difference between light and dark. If everything kind of merges together and looks like it's all the same value, that's what you want to stay away from. So make sure that you have really strong whites, really strong darks. And as long as you have those two things, then it will definitely look good. So I went back and I added in my more black, and now I'm going back in and adding more whites so that I make sure that I maintain that high contrast. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back and redefine any details and add any contrast as needed using our color pencils as well as chalk pastel. So you're going to look at your own picture and decide if there's any areas that you feel need more work. So you may need more work on the part above the bridge as well as the parts in between the bridge. So right now we have just the part in between the bridge as being like kind of a blurred section. But in reality, all these areas from up above would continue through the middle of the bridge. So that's what I'm going to work on first. So I'm going to take my white pastel and I'm going to go in between the bridge and add some white lines first. So I'm just kind of continuing what I had above the bridge in between the bridge. Over here, you need a little bit. And remember, just always start with a little bit. You can always add more, but it's a little bit hard to get rid of something. Okay, and then I think I'll take a little bit of the black chalk pastel over here and bring that down in between the middle of the bridge. I think that's good. And then maybe I'll take a little bit of this olive green and a few lines right here. Okay. All right, so now that I've first added my white, then my black, then my olive green, I'm just gonna very ever so gently blend that. I don't want it to get super blurry, so I'm not gonna blend too much. Okay, so now I did the area behind the bridge itself, and now I'm gonna work on the part above. So I'm gonna take a black color pencil, let me sharpen it again. And I'm gonna kind of redefine these bush areas up here. So just gonna start doing some vertical lines for some leaves that are just kind of falling from the trees. It's basically the same thing that I did with the chalk pastel, but now I'm doing it with color pencil, which will give me a little bit more of a defined shape and line. forget to, if you do something above the bridge, don't forget to do it in between the bridge as well, just so it looks like it's staying consistent. On mine, it just seems to get blended in a little bit. So I'm just going to use my finger to blend that. And then now that I've added black color pencil, let me just blend a little bit of this. The color pencil will actually blend a little bit too when it's on top of the color pencil, on top of the chalk pastel, whereas normally a color pencil doesn't blend. Okay, so now I just need to look at my picture and decide, is there anything else that I need to add? I do feel like I could use some white chalk pastel to go back and add just a few highlights to the plants. Just again, to make sure that I have my contrast in there. And that it didn't all, especially when I just blended with my finger, it all kind of got back to the same value. So I want to make sure that I have my, preserve my contrast. I'm literally like just kind of scribbling with the white, like little short lines, little short circles. Again, less is more. You can always add more, but you can't really take it away. So always do a little bit, then look at your picture, then do a little bit, then look at your picture, and then add more if you feel you need it. So I like the top part, but I do feel like I could use some white on this part of the bush. So I'm going to add a few strokes just along the edge, the top edge. Now I did do this bush very heavy with color pencils, so the white chalk pastel isn't going to work too well. I could try my white color pencil as well. I'm going to go over to this bush, do the same thing, kind of go along the top edges, add a little bit of contrast, go down to these bushes underneath the bridge, just add a few strokes of light. And then just go through the water and see if I can add just a few little sideways strokes of white highlights. Okay, so now I just really want you to look at your bridge and make sure that your bridge shows up. And you can either add white or black or both to make sure your bridge shows up. Okay, there's my white, and I'm going to go one more time with black. I'm just going to blend that a little bit. Got a little chalky. Okay, tap off the chalk, wipe off your desk. Clean off your fingers. Sharpen that black color pencil one more time. And sign your name. I always like to sign my name and put the date, and you're done. I hope you enjoyed this class. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in another class soon. Thank you. Bye.